Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we are talking about what is perhaps the most important part of any EV, and that is of course the battery pack. And in the Seal's case, that is the Blade LFP battery. And in this video we'll compare the pros and cons of the Blade LFP versus some other lithium-ion battery packs. So let's get started.
Power of the future ride. Shining bright inside. Blade LFP taking charge. Flat curve, mighty large. From 30 to 80%. In 26 minutes we spent. 100% no sweat. 0 to full set. High voltage dream at night. 150 kilowatts inside. Still fast at 99. Blade LFP online. The electric seal.
And the Seal's battery pack is of course located between the front axle and the rear axle here in this kind of skateboard form factor, like almost any battery pack nowadays in modern EVs. That's where it's located. But one thing that makes the Blade LFP very different to many others is that it's structural pack, meaning that the actual battery forms the part of the car structure and the chassis. So basically the floor in the car is the battery, and that's a big difference to, let's say, at least 95% of electric cars out there. Of course there is some coverage both below and above the pack, but essentially the battery pack is the floor in the Seal. And BYD calls this structural form a cell-to-body battery, or CTB technology. And this of course gives multiple benefits to the Seal. One is the rigidity of the body structure, the chassis of the car. And BYD themselves, they claim that the Seal has super sports car-like torsional stiffness. And that is achieved by this structure that has very high rigidity, which is partly due to this cell-to-body battery pack. This of course makes it easier to design a sporty car like this. So the ground clearance is still 14 to 15 centimeters. That is actually pretty good compared to some other EV sedans. But the car is 146 centimeters in height, and it has this very sloping roof line, so this sporty looks. But still, even long adults can still sit in the back seat. And all of these things are, at least to some extent, connected to the effective utilization of space that is enabled by the Blade LFP battery in cell-to-body form. And if you take a look at some competitors without this structural battery pack technology, for example Hyundai Ioniq 6. So it's very similar in shape and size, the same type of ground clearance, but then tall adults can't sit in the back. Well, of course, there are many design decisions impacting this, but the cell-to-body battery gives better room to work with. It's always, when you save a few centimeters and you can translate that to the cabin space, that will definitely make a difference. So there were two pros of the Blade LFP already before we get to the battery chemistries. So that was the enforcing the rigidity of the chassis and enabling better utilization of space. Now let's go to the chemistries of different lithium-ion battery packs. So BYD Seal uses an LFP battery, like mentioned, and that is a type of lithium-ion battery. The most common battery chemistries in EVs are NCM or NCA batteries, where N stands for nickel, M for manganese, A for aluminium, and C for cobalt. And the LFP stands for Lithium Iron Phosphate. And of course, while electric cars are always more environmental friendly in the long run than the internal combustion engine cars, it is also good to highlight that there are also differences between EVs. And even when the EVs put lower burden on the environment than internal combustion engine cars, the EVs with NCM or NCA battery chemistries, they have cobalt and nickel, and those are generally among the most rare metals used in manufacturing the batteries. And the fact that the Blade LFP does not contain cobalt or nickel at all, that makes it ahead of many other battery packs in this regard. Another advantage of the Blade LFP and LFP in general is that they are more resistant to high temperatures, which can be important in case of a malfunction in the pack. With other lithium-ion battery chemistries, a thermal runaway is a very rare phenomenon where a malfunctioning battery sees a very rapid increase in temperature, which can cause a fire. Luckily, all batteries in modern EVs are safe, and these events are very, very rare, but it has to be said that the LFP is ahead of the other chemistries here, because it's practically impossible to have this thermal runaway happening on LFP battery pack in normal use, and it is even challenging to trigger it when intentionally trying to do so in laboratory conditions. Because the LFP battery sees a very mild temperature rise in this kind of malfunctioning case, which is just a few degrees Celsius per minute, whereas the perhaps least safe chemistry of NCA can see temperature rising hundreds of times faster than the LFP. So LFP is super safe in this regard. BYD's famous nail penetration test, where the battery is penetrated by a nail in laboratory conditions, the NCM battery reached 600 degrees Celsius almost instantly and caught fire. The Blade battery didn't react much at all, as the maximum temperature reached was just 60 degrees, and of course there was no fire at all. Then there is the cost side of things. So the cost of manufacturing lithium iron phosphate cells is coming down rapidly. During the last 12 months, CATL, which is one of the largest battery manufacturers in the world, has said to reduce the cost per kilowatt hour to half, which is a stunning development in that short time span. This development would mean that the LFP battery of the seal size, which is 82 kilowatt hours or 84 kilowatt hours, would have dropped from approximately 9,000 euros to 4,500 euros only. Well, of course, the Blade battery might be different as it's manufactured by BYD and not CATL, but this gives some direction. And good to also highlight that those prices which I mentioned are not consumer prices, they are prices for car manufacturers when they purchase batteries from companies like CATL. So we will list price as one of the pros for the LFP, as that is significantly cheaper to manufacture than other types of lithium-ion batteries. Another benefit of the LFP is longer lifespan. Whereas NMC and NCA batteries, they can achieve maybe 1,000 to 2,000 charge to discharge cycles. The LFP packs, including the Blade battery, offer a minimum of 3,000 full cycles. And in average use, this is already something like 20 years easily. Even if you would do a full charge to discharge on a daily basis, which would mean driving, for example, 400 kilometers every day, the battery would be good for more than 8 years. If you drive 150 kilometers or so on a daily basis, we are talking about 20 years. In this regard, also the NCM battery lifespan actually is more than enough, but LFP basically doubles that. Also, 100% charge is not an issue with LFP. In case of other chemistries, you should avoid charging to 100% not to cause degradation in the battery. But LFP actually benefits from being charged fully occasionally. Of course, in case of all lithium-ion batteries, you should not keep the battery full charged up without any use for a long period of time. And this is also the case with the LFP. But with LFP, there is no reason to control the maximum charge percentage in the same way as with NCM or NCA batteries. Finally, one point about higher state of charges is that LFP charges relatively fast via CCS chargers, even at 99%. I've personally received, was it 47 kilowatts at 99% on Ionity with the seal, and this would not happen with other battery chemistries. Of course, most often it makes sense to continue your trip when the battery reaches maybe 85%, but in cases where you want to do a full charge, the Blade LFP allows you to do that in a reasonable time, without slowing down that much at higher state of charges. Also, the peak power is available even when the battery is more than half full. And this is definitely not the case with other type of batteries, which often require empty battery, below 20%, to be able to reach that peak charging power. Of course, all these benefits don't come without some compromises. There is no such a thing as a perfect battery, and the Blade ain't one either. The biggest negative point about LFP in general is its low energy density. So LFP can't pack as many kilowatt hours in the same sized battery pack as the alternative battery types. However, the energy density is also developing fast, and BYD is among the leading innovators in this area, and has announced that the next generation Blade battery will see a rise of 30% in the energy density, which will actually bring it on par with NCM. The second disadvantage is the lower peak power in charging. NCM or NCA with 800 volts can reach peak powers of around 250, whereas the Blade battery's maximum is at 150 kilowatts, even though it's 800 volts as well. Even though the charge curve is the one that counts, not the peak power, it's clear that the Blade is not the fastest to charge, with 50% taking 26 minutes, whereas some competitors can achieve the same in just 10 minutes. So that is definitely a drawback. But here also the future looks quite promising for LFP, as for example CATL has announced that their latest LFP batteries will be able to charge 600 kilometers worth of energy in just 10 minutes. Even with a conservative calculation, this translates into a peak power of 400 kilowatts, on paper at least. In reality, there isn't really any chargers yet that could deliver this power, but the rate of innovation in LFP is pretty amazing, also considering the price development. And that innovation is led by players like CATL and BYD, which is also the reason why, for example, Tesla buys a lot of their batteries from BYD. Then there is the issue of weight. Especially the Seal Excellence is quite a hefty machine, and part of the weight is explained by its 84 kWh LFP battery. With other type of batteries, some weight would have been avoided, and this of course has an impact on range and driving dynamics as well. The Seal definitely would benefit from being a couple of hundreds of kilograms lighter than what it is today, so the weight has to be listed as a con. Other cons of the Blade LFP, at least in the Seal, include possible rapid gate due to insufficient cooling of the battery when driving very long distances and doing multiple fast charging sessions within a short period of time. When I did almost 7,000 kilometer road trip with the Seal this summer, I bumped into this on one day when driving something like 1200 kilometers in about 300 kilometer stints. The third CCS session of the day saw this rapid gating. Not a huge deal, but it's good to know that this can happen. And I'm sure BYD is considering enhancing the cooling system for the next generations of the Seal and the Blade battery. Finally, there is a possible disadvantage of the LFP in calculating the exact state of charges and range, especially at below 10%. I've seen reports where the users of the Seal, Atto 3 or Dolphin report a sudden loss of percentages, range and power at low state of charges. Of course, that happens rarely, but when it does, it can be quite an unpleasant surprise. And I've read that this is due to the LFP battery having low voltage differences between high state of charge and low state of charge. While probably contributing to the safety, this makes it difficult to read the exact state and can cause these type of problems. So this was the Blade LFP pros and cons and a comparison to NCM and NCA batteries. As a conclusion, I could say that there is of course not one perfect technology in this area, but my prediction is that the LFP will be the winning chemistry in the market during the next 5 years. I also think the pros of the Blade LFP outweigh the cons, but that is of course a matter of personal opinion. Let me know your opinions and experiences in the comments, and please remember to subscribe to the channel. That will help this channel to grow and me to produce more content here. So thanks for watching and see you next time.
Battery cool, efficient run, driving with the rising sun. Journey far, no limit seen. Blade LFP, the green machine. High voltage, dream of night. 150 kilowatts inside, still fast at 99. Blade LFP.